Welcome, my name is Mark Frentz. I'm going to give you a video. This is not going to be a quick video, and I'm going to warn you right from the beginning. This is going to be a longer video because I want to give you more information and more action steps than most people do in YouTube videos or helpful videos in different ways. Not that they're not helpful. I want to be more helpful, okay? What I've found is that these are scary times for most people. But I'm going to ask you a question right off the bat. Do you tend to panic? Do you tend to know a lot of people who panic where fear overwhelms them and they're not able to do anything with it? They're not able to exist or function because no matter what's going on, no matter how safe the situation is, it's crazy? Or are you, and do you know people that are a lot like kind of those chill as a cucumber type people? They're the people who are unflappable, the people who nothing really gets them riled up. They're just simply not often overwhelmed. Is it that that second group of people doesn't fear anything? I don't believe so. I believe they do fear. I know that I've got a lot of fears in my life. Having said that, so much of the time, it's simply coping skills and how we learn to deal with fear that makes it panic or manageable fear. Fear that helps us versus panic that destroys our lives on so many other levels. So what I want to do today is give you two things. I want to give you a lot of information. My background in psychology, I love talking about fear and emotions and other things like that. But I'm also an executive coach, and I try to make these concepts applicable to business owners. So that's what I'm going to try to do today. So what's going on with fear? Really quick quote. I appreciate a lot of quotes. And I like this one by Jack Canfield. So this is one of the co-writers of, or co-authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he said, everything you want is on the other side of fear. I'm going to repeat that. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. Is this not true for the most part? Is it not true? Is it not true that when we want a deeper relationship, when we want to engage with people far more, that often we've got to get past fears to get there. In order to grow in depth of relationship, we've got to practice vulnerability with people. And that can be really difficult because fear comes up. And yet if we want the deeper relationship, we got to deal with the fear on some level. We've got to get to the other side of fear. In a different realm, in business, what if you want to make more sales? What if you want to speak publicly or do more videos or whatever you want to do? Maybe you're speaking live, or you're selling more stuff, or you are creating some new content, or you are hiring new people. All of those situations can be really scary for a lot of people. And I would guess that for most of those situations, it's scary for almost everyone. There's some fear involved. Is this person going to work out? If I'm paying them a bunch of money, are they going to give back the value that I'm paying them? All that kind of stuff. In order to grow, though, in order to change, in order to get to where we want to be, we need to deal with fear on some level. So let's get into this. I want to start off, before I really get into this, I want to really answer the first question. That is, what is the difference between panic and fear? Now the images here in the top left, this guy is panicking. And this is what I'm going to define panic as. Panic is where you are completely overwhelmed by your fear to the point, so I'm talking about anxiety attacks, that kind of stuff, to the point where you're not able to function. You're not able to sleep. You're not able to make great decisions. You're not able to do the things that you want and need to do for yourself, your business, your relationships, your physical health, your emotional health, whatever that is, because fear has taken over. Fear has taken over. In the bottom right, you see this image of a guy standing on the top of it doesn't look like a super high mountain. Maybe it's the wrong image or what. But there's this mountain climber who has obviously, in my opinion, obviously dealt with fear on some level. That he's standing on the edge of a cliff. I don't care who the person is. I've talked to a lot of people who do daredevil type things, and they still experience fear. I've often been asked myself, about 10 years ago, I was working as a psychologist in mental health for a healthcare provider, basically the government system, before I went into coaching. And somebody took me aside one time and he said, Mark, how is it that you don't have fear? And I said, I do have fear. I have fear all the time. We all have fear. If you say you don't have fear, you're typically a liar, or you are confused, because we all have fear on some level. Listen, I've had fear. I've traveled to China. I've lived there for 8 years. I've eaten a whole bunch of crazy things that most people wouldn't go close to, okay? Ask me sometime if you're curious about this. I'm not going to gross people out on here. I've lived in Sweden. So I've lived in Europe. I've lived in China. I've lived in Austria. I've lived in Canada. I've traveled around to many different places. I've tried a crazy amount of things. I've done cliff diving into water, and I've jumped off of boats, and I've done a whole bunch of things that some people are going to think crazy. I haven't done the craziest things that I've seen other people do. I'm not an X Games kind of person. Having said that, I've done a lot of things in life. And what I found, going back to the quote that I just showed you, what I found is that when I push through fear, when I breathe through fear, when I move through fear, not against it, I don't fight against it, I move with it, I find that my life has become far fuller. Far fuller. I've experienced far more than the average person has experienced. Not because I'm a superhuman, but because I've learned to deal with fear on some level. Not fight against it, deal with it, okay? So again, when we've got fear, but we are able to work with it, we're able to accomplish amazing things in life. When it becomes panicky, when we become panicky, when it overwhelms us, we end up doing far less. And that's what I'm really going to get to in this video is how to work with our fear, how to understand it, and then really specifically I'm going to give you some good action steps at the end of this video to take care. Again, this is not a short video. If you want something that's 5 minutes long, this is not the place for that, okay? If you want something that's longer, far more in depth, and is going to give you practical help that you can work on starting today, and you will actually see a decrease in your fear today, or in the panicky fear, the overwhelming fear today, then this is something that could help you a lot. So, really quick picture of the brain, and I'm a psycho, so I appreciate the brain, okay? Looking at the brain. Right in the middle, you see that light-colored part right in the middle. That's called psychologists call it our limbic system, okay? Some of you might have heard this called your emotional brain. Some people call it your subconscious mind or your unconscious mind. It doesn't really matter what we're calling it right now. For the purpose of today, what I want you to understand and realize is that midbrain, that middle part, your limbic system, your emotional brain, that's where your emotions kind of exist. And historically, something fascinating has happened with humans. Humans are not the strongest on the planet. We're not the biggest, we're not the strongest, but our brains have evolved in really unique ways to protect us and to help us. Now, two parts of the brain that I'm going to point out right here. There's the top part that goes around, and then there's that middle part, okay? That top part that goes around, that is our logical brain. That's the ability, especially the front part, is the part of our brain that allows us to think greater thoughts than the average animal, okay? I would argue that we're smarter than the typical alligator or snake. We have higher functioning brains that can do a lot more. We're far more creative, okay? Now we've got hands too, which doesn't hurt, right? But and opposable thumbs. But that part of our brain really helps us do things that other animals can't do. Then we've got this middle brain, this midbrain, or this emotional brain, and that part of our brain, it is our emotional brain. It keeps us safe, and that's the purpose of it. It's to keep us safe. I'll give you an example. Now, you've heard of the fight or flight reaction or response, right? That's what this part of our brain is for. It's basically an alarm system. And an example is, when is the last time you got into an argument with somebody, a disagreement with a family member, and you know better than to say what you're about to say. You even know that you shouldn't be saying what you're about to say, and yet you say it anyway. That's like you don't have control. What's happening in that situation? What's happening when you go, I want to make some sales calls, or I want to get into a sales conversation, or I want to speak publicly, or I want to grow my business in some way, and yet I'm procrastinating on it. I'm stopping from doing it, even though I want to do it. It's in my best interest. What's going on? Well, that logical part of our brain on the outside and the top is going, let's do this. This is helpful for me. And that middle part of your brain is going, there's no way. I'm terrified of this. And it's pulling back, or it's pushing people away with the words or tone of voice you use in arguments, okay? Again, that middle part of your brain is an alarm system. And the way it's protected us for a very long time is by basically going, it's red alert, you need to either run away or fight something right now. You need to take action because you are in danger. And you know what? When there were lions and tigers and bears, oh my, all over the place, we were in danger, okay? We're a weak creature. We were in danger. And so we needed to react very quickly to things. And so our brain developed to react very quickly to situations. And that's a good thing on so many levels. Having said that, this is one side effect of that. That middle part of our brain, the emotional part of our brain, actually, when we're feeling overwhelmed, it shuts off blood flow. It restricts, I shouldn't say it shuts off, it restricts blood flow to our logical brain, okay? And so this part of my brain, this logical part of my brain, isn't able to think. I'm going to repeat this. When we are emotionally overwhelmed, you know this for yourself. When we are emotionally overwhelmed, we are not able to think clearly. This is a very important point. I'm going to come back to this over and over again in different ways, okay? And this is why it's so important to have a working relationship with our emotional brain. Because if we don't, it takes over. We lose control of what we're doing and thinking and saying, and we are just in self-protection mode. When you have somebody that lashes out to you, when you have somebody that ignores you, they're self-preserving. And this knowledge is going to help you interact with them in a different way, because now you can make things safer for them rather than simply saying they're a jerk or an awful person or whatever it is, okay? Okay, so the cool thing is this part of our brain can protect us. The problem is that this part of our brain will react to threats, perceived threats, whether they are real or not. It doesn't matter whether they're real or not. It matters whether we believe they are real. Very important point, because we're going to talk about imagination later on, how you can visualize and actually help yourself with this, okay? So again, this is what has kept humans around. But think about how much of our current economy is absolutely focused on fear and in utilizing fear and maybe manipulating us through fear. Think about news media. Think about salespeople. Think about government protection. Think about wars. Think about fences around your house. Think about Western medicine and how it works. Think about flu shots or washing your hands 100 times a day. Think about the mental problems that we have surrounding this, and psychologists in general. When you look at our economy, you go, wow, a huge part of our economy is based on fear. Why is this? Well, number one reason, it makes money. It makes money. People utilize fear to make money, and that's a fact. I'm not saying any of these things are good or bad, by the way. Secondly, it's because fear is a powerful motivator for us. And if you can start to learn to use fear as a powerful motivator to get what you need and want out of life, when you can use it to work out more and to exercise more and to eat healthier and to have better relationships and to grow your business, then it is fantastic. If you simply are panicked and it shuts down your brain and you're not able to think, that's not useful, okay? And then I'm seeing this all the time these days around me. So here's a question that I'm going to ask you before we move to the next slide, and that is, what kind of situations do you fear most? I'm going to give you a minute just to think about this. You can pause the video. What do you fear most? What kind of situations do you fear most? What are the situations that you're in where the fear comes up the greatest? Just sit with that for a second. When you're ready, just hit pause or hit play again, and it'll start, okay? I'm looking at some human body systems here, and if you look at these systems here, a system that it isn't really here is your sympathetic system. So your sympathetic system, and I'll be quick, I'm not going to be too jargony with all this stuff, okay? I'm not going to use words that people don't understand typically, but basically your sympathetic system is your body getting ready to react to fear or anger or feeling overwhelmed with some emotion, okay? And it actually affects many parts of your body. So your eyes dilate, your pupils will dilate, they'll get bigger, and so that you can take in more light, so that you can react quicker to things. Your heart rate increases, okay? So it pumps more blood through your system. It affects almost every one of these systems, by the way. So you're pumping more blood when you become overwhelmed, and then when your sympathetic system reacts, so your emotional brain is reacting to something. Your lungs dilate, so you actually it increases the amount of oxygen it can take into the body, your lungs. Amazing. You begin sweating. There are all these things. Adrenaline is pumped through your body. There are all these reactions in your body. And this is designed in your body to be able to react quickly to situations. You've heard of people doing crazy things in hard situations. Moms picking up, lifting large objects off their kids or whatever it is. Because when we've got all that adrenaline pumping through us, we're actually become almost like a superhuman. We are able to move faster and react to things faster. That's a helpful thing. Now, on the other side, there are certain parts of our body that doesn't help with that. So for example, our digestive system. Our digestive system basically shuts down. It basically shuts down when we are in this fight or flight reaction, when we're feeling overwhelmed with fear, when we're emotionally overwhelmed. Why? Because it doesn't help to digest food right now. It helps to run away or to lash out or whatever. That's what's going to protect us, again, historically. So why do you think so many people that are anxious or nervous have digestive problems? It's because the food is sitting there. It's not being digested. It's not doing what our body is designed to do with it. This should explain quite a bit, okay? So again, our blood vessels dilate in muscles. It can constrict in gastrointestinal organs, but basically there's a decrease of blood flow to certain parts of our body. So like our sex organs are going to operate very well in these situations. And if you think about a bunch of, I don't know, erectile dysfunction or whatever it is, people are struggling often because it's fear. Not all the time. This is not the biggest reason, but there's a legitimate reason there of people not being able to function properly. Okay, so let's go to this next slide here. I just want to show a few things. So these are the main phobias and fears consistently listed wherever you go to lists of fears and phobias. These are the top-rated phobias. One is needles. One is thunderstorms. Heights is another one. Another one is open spaces, or for those on the opposite end, closed spaces, claustrophobia, right? Then we've got being focused on in public at all. So this guy's public speaking, but legitimately this could include any social phobias in public speaking. Then there's like bugs and snakes and spiders and those kinds of things, okay? Then we've got people who are afraid of dogs, and then there's another last fear that is on all the top lists, and that is flying. So here's again, I'm going to point this out. When you look at the picture, I'm going to go back and just go through these slowly. As you watch these, where do you have a reaction? Feel the reaction in you. Where is it that you go, whoa, 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 that's turning my stomach a little bit. Whoa, that freaks me out a little bit. It's fascinating how this can affect us so quickly, right? Fascinating. Here's the other fascinating thing. Something that causes fear in one person, that somebody is fearful of and has a strong reaction to, other people don't have a reaction to at all. So I'm looking at all these pictures. I don't have a strong reaction to any of these now. Now, that wasn't always the case. I used to be afraid of a lot more things. I don't have a strong reaction right now. I've trained myself in very specific ways to not have a reaction. And again, we're going to talk about this over the course of this video, okay? So the emotional brain basically makes fascinating connections to anything surrounding a situation. So if you think about your favorite food, okay? So I die for pizza. I love pizza. So let's say I eat pizza and I actually get the flu. Like the day later in the day when I've eaten the pizza, I get sick and I'm starting to vomit or whatever. Your brain makes really unique connections between things that surround each other. So I ate pizza, now I feel sick. Often our brains, have you ever had this happen where you've got a favorite food and because you were sick around that time, you now have a strong reaction against that food for a little while? It takes a while to get over it. I've had some people that I know that have not eaten something ever again because they had something else happen to them around that time. Our brain makes really unique connections. It connects things that are not necessarily connected. Probably I didn't get sick from the pizza. Having said that, brain makes a quick connection and now it associates fear with something else. This is what our brain does consistently, and this is a great thing for our brain. It makes good connections so that we can be careful. If you ever heard of people with that sixth sense, people who live in abusive relationships often have that sixth sense of something bad is going to happen. And the reason for that is because they've made all these connections, these patterns in their mind. So I had a client who was afraid of public washrooms. He was afraid of public washrooms. I'm not talking about like a normal fear. This individual came to me, and I think he was in his 40s or 50s. This is years ago. Came to me in his 40s or 50s. This is when I was practicing psychology, and he could not hold a full-time job. The reason he could not hold a full-time job is because he had a phobia about entering or even going close to a public washroom. Even if it was in an individual stall, like an individual door that you could lock from the inside, he wasn't going anywhere near a public washroom. Now I investigated this a little bit and went like, what's going on here? And quickly discovered that when he was a kid in junior high, something awful happened in a public washroom to him. So his brain made this connection between public washrooms and fear. Public washrooms and danger that he did not get over for many, many, many years. He wasn't able to hold a full-time job because every time he had to go to the washroom, he had to travel back home in order to go to the washroom. Now, this almost seems funny or comical on some level. Like, are you serious? This is crazy how this is affecting the guy. But this is how fear is it not? This is how panic is. That when we are overwhelmed with fear, we're not able to do everyday simple things. Now, his parents came to me. His parents actually talked to me and said, you've got to help our kid. His parents were in their mid to late 70s. And they were saying, if you don't help this guy, he's living at home with us. If you don't help him, we're going to be dying pretty soon. And if he doesn't figure out this full-time job thing, we're going to have a lot of problems when we die, or he's going to have a lot of problems when we die, right? So we worked together for a little while. Should I share the entire story here? You know, I'm going to come back to the story in a little bit, okay? So just keep in mind there was this adult guy, 40 or 50 years old, 40 or 50 years old, and he was unable to urinate in a public washroom because of his fear. He wasn't even able to enter it, okay? And I'll tell you how he helped himself with some of my help, and then how this can be applied for you in a little bit later, okay? This is at the end of the video. Fear of speaking in public. Again, I talked about my fear. This is a huge, huge fear. Why is it scary to speak in public? Well, most of us have made the connection far, far, far earlier. There shouldn't be anything terrifying for most people about speaking publicly. Then this is why. In my experience, me speaking as well as listening to other people speak, no matter how many mistakes people make, typically, I've never once seen people throw tomatoes and rotten food at any public speaker. I've never seen somebody speak about people poorly. Usually people are really encouraging. If they see someone struggling up there, they're actually more encouraging. So why would we fear public speaking? Well, the reason is most of us in elementary school, junior high, high school, we learned when you say something publicly, you better be ready for ridicule. And we've learned that it's terrifying to speak and have other people listen and have eyes on us because so many kids were made fun of. Even if it wasn't us, even if we just witnessed it. We make these connections with fear, do we not? So our brain makes these interesting connections. Now, emotional scars are like physical scars in some ways. They're legitimate. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes here every once in a while. Scars and calluses protect what's underneath. So if you think about, I've got tons of scars on my body. So you've got a scar and there's extra tissue there. Whether it's muscle or bone, when your bone breaks, it actually builds up stronger than it was before, or meatier than it was before. There's more bone involved. You can see where breaks are for people who died thousands of years ago and things that were healed because it has a certain way of looking. You can see where there's extra bone there, or extra muscle there, or extra skin there. And it's protecting what's underneath. And that's the same as emotional scars, is it not? We have some poor experience in a relationship or business or sales or whatever it is, and then we need to protect ourselves. We feel the need to protect ourselves in the future. So emotional scars, I'm going to just give you some examples. Emotional scars. Maybe you were sexually abused at some level. We learn to protect ourselves and to be more conscious and be a little bit more timid in order to protect ourselves. That's natural. That's good on many levels, okay? But while it served a purpose at some point in time, and this is where the problem is with our brains, okay? While it served a purpose in time for that client of mine to stay out of public washrooms in junior high, it wasn't helping him now. Well, it served a purpose maybe in junior high and high school for you to not be in the public eye. Is it serving your purposes now? Well, it served your purposes not to share too much about yourself or be vulnerable with others. Is it serving your purposes now in a close relationship that you desire, an intimate relationship? And that's the question. This is the true question. The difference between, again, panic and fear is, one, it takes over, and it doesn't even make sense most of the time. Fear, it's logical, it's connected. There's a reason we should be afraid of something, and yet we're still able to work with it, okay? Okay, let's go to the next slide here. So there's a perception of what is going on, and that's as strong as reality. So this individual, I'm going to talk about this individual who came to me, the man who was afraid to go into a public washroom. What I started doing with him, and I'm not going to give all of this away to you, but when he simply visualized walking close to a public washroom, he wasn't going there. He was simply visualizing it. He would have a fear reaction, and he would have a fear response. And this is true of all of us. When is the last time you were getting ready for something the next day, and you were thinking about it at night, and you went, I got to go to sleep, and yet it was keeping you up all night? Or a business thing, you were procrastinating in business, and it was keeping you up all night. Or it was keeping you away from what you're doing. What you want to do, what you need to do for your business. This happens to a lot of people, okay? I put this image up here of a rope because I've done this a lot. I've been on high ropes courses, and often in high ropes courses, they will put a rope. And if you walk, I can walk in a straight line. On a rope, I can balance on a rope. As long as it's tight enough, I can balance on a rope if it's 6 inches above the ground. I have a fear of heights, though. And so if the rope is just 5 or 6 feet off the ground, all of a sudden, my legs get shakier. It's the same tightness of the rope. I'm doing the same activity. The difference is simply in height. And it's not even, I'm not going to kill myself off of a 5-foot rope, right? With the height. And yet I find that in the past, I've been shaky with that. It's fascinating how our brains work. It's not logical. Again, we simply have an experience and it affects us. So here, I'm going to give you some stats, okay? If you live to 80 years old, you have a 1 in 12,000 chance of being struck by lightning, okay? So it depends on where you live, partially, but you have a 1 in 12,000 chance of being struck by lightning. Now, here's another stat. For a shark attack, if you live to 80, you have a 1 in 11,500,000 chance not to be killed, just to be attacked. Most people that have been attacked by sharks live. Okay? So think about that. You're far more likely to be struck by lightning than to be attacked, not killed, attacked by a shark. You are more likely to die from drowning at the beach, killed by a dog, or even a vending machine than a shark attack, okay? It's amazing. Do you know that ladders and toilets are even more dangerous? Even digging in the sand until it collapses on you is far more risky than being killed by a shark, or attacked by a shark, sorry. Now, here's the cool thing here. Does that information that I just gave you dissipate the fear of sharks for you? Simply stating that you're more likely to be killed by all these other normal things, ladders and toilets, right? And digging in the sand until it collapses on you. It's far more dangerous than being attacked, not killed, attacked by a shark. Does that help you? Does it dispel the fear of sharks for you? I'm willing to bet it doesn't if you're afraid of sharks. I'm willing to bet if I talk about fear and heights and all that kind of stuff, the information doesn't help. And again, coming back to what we talked about before, this is because our logical brain and our emotional brain, they're not operating together. Now, I'm going to give a key to actually getting over fear or to working through fear, and that is to connect these parts of our brain. And I'm going to give you some actions for that, okay? First of all, there are irrational fears, and this is panicky fears, and those are the ones that are the dangerous ones. They aren't adding any value to us. They're simply holding us back. So think about people who are OCD. Everyone's OCD, I believe, to a certain degree, or at least that's what people who have OCD tell ourselves, right? But for example, locking the door and unlocking the door, checking on it 50 times, building a bunker under your house. If you are storing 18 months of food worth in your house, or whatever it is, if you're that kind of person, typically those are not really rational fears. Those are the irrational fears, and they're not adding value to your life. They're protecting you, but you're wasting energy on protecting yourself rather than going out and living life. Washing your hands 1,000 times a day, whatever that is, okay? These are not rational fears. They're irrational fears. Now, if I named one that you struggle with, you probably said, well, no, that one's rational. That one makes sense. And this is what we tell ourselves to protect ourselves. But typically, those are the ones that get in the way. Fears get in the way of life. And this is my belief. My belief is that it's not okay. It's not okay for fear to get in the way of life. Fear is going to be experienced. The problem is when it gets in the way of life. So these are the fears we need to work on constantly to push back the boundaries and growth, and grow in spite of our fear. Now I'm gonna give you one more quote, and then we're gonna go to the action steps. What can we do about fear? And I'm gonna tell you some stories. Again, I've finished the story about the guy who had struggles with public washrooms. Okay, Robin Sharma said, "The fears we don't face become our limits." Again, I'm gonna repeat that. The fears we don't face become our limits. And this is very true of fear. Fear has a really unique way of closing in on us over time. And if we're not constantly pushing it back, if we're not constantly... So I read a story about the Amazon jungle one time, and how the Amazon jungle, some people are farmers in the middle of the Amazonian jungle. And what they have to do is be constantly vigilant. They have to constantly push back the borders of their farmland. Because if they're not, then within something like 2.5 years, if they leave the farm within 2.5 years, maybe even less, maybe 1.5 years, the growth will completely take over the farm, and you won't even be able to tell where the farm is any longer. That's crazy with how quickly it grows. And fear is a little bit like that. I've met so many people in my life, I've helped so many people in my life that had one fear, and as they focused on it and gave power to that fear, it actually encroached further and further and further on and around them. Okay? It enclosed upon them. What we need to do is constantly not allow fears that we don't face to become our limits. We need to face our fears. We need to push back those fears. And I'm gonna give you some help with that. Okay, so here let's get into some action steps. I'm gonna talk about my son. Okay. I'm gonna talk about a time when. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes here. My son, when he was about 6 years old, he had some fear about falling. He hadn't had fear up till then, but then all of a sudden started getting this fear of falling. What I ended up doing is I've ended up doing things with him. So making sure if we're going on a roller coaster, something like that, we've got a local roller coaster in our city. We go on the roller coaster a lot in the summer. And the reason I do that is to help him get over his fears. Now, he still has this reaction in some ways to it, but in large part, he's gotten over his fear because he's pushed through it a lot of the time, all right? And this is a key. We need to push through our fears on some levels. Again, it doesn't mean fight against them. I'm being very careful with my language here, okay? I was in Mexico a couple years ago, Yucatan Peninsula, and they've got these fascinating things in the Yucatan Peninsula. If you've never been, they've got these basically holes in the ground. And this is where water rushes underground, and sometimes there are these entire caverns underneath the ground, and you don't see it anywhere from above, and yet you go down into this, and there's this huge cavern, and the water's super, super deep, and I went with a bunch of clients, we were having a good time, we go down there, and in this cenote, there was a diving board. And the first diving board was maybe, I don't know, 15 feet in the air. And the second board was about 30 feet in the air. And as we're climbing down, like it's slimy, so it's really slippery. And this diving board was kind of like, it looked like it was about to break, and it was kind of at a slant. And I'm like, whoa, that looks scary. And immediately, as soon as I saw that, and I felt the fear, and you know, I've talked about my fear of heights. What I did was I realized I've got to push through this. And this has been a basic help to me, a skill that I've built that has helped me so much of the time. When I feel fear, I pay attention to it, I listen to what it's telling me, and if it's legitimately dangerous, I won't do something. But if it's legitimately not dangerous, and I simply have to push through my fear, I constantly push through it. This is a promise that I've made to myself, and I try to keep it as often as I can. So we're walking down these rickety steps, and I see this rickety diving board from 30, 35 feet up. It was probably, about 10, 15 meters, something like that. And I told my daughter immediately, and this is what I do when I experience fear. I immediately told my daughter, hey, Jay, I think I'm going to jump off that diving board, okay? Do you want to see me jump off the diving board? And she went, yeah. She was scared even thinking about it, right? But the reason why I made that commitment to somebody else to jump off it immediately was because that's what I was fearing, and there was no legitimate reason to fear it. There was no legitimate reason to fear it, okay? Some people might be thinking, oh, I'm scared of heights, and it was rickety. There was a legitimate reason. You know what? There wasn't a legitimate. It's been there for, I'm sure, a long time, and I doubt I'm going to be the one person that breaks through. And even if I did break through, I'm over water, so I'll probably be fine, right? So I made a commitment that I'd push through it, and I verbalized this commitment. I made it public so that it would hold me even more accountable. I'm more likely to do it. So then we played out in the water a little bit, and I said, okay, it's time for me to jump off the board. So I climbed up these steps, and I could feel the fear rising in me. And again, it's only 40 feet up in the air, and then my height above that is so 40 to 45 feet, right? In the end, I'm 6 feet tall. So I was looking over this board, and again, it's my legs started shaking, and I felt it rush through me. But because I made the commitment, and I had somebody videotaping this, again, just to push me a little bit more, I decided I'd go through with it. No, I jumped off the board. I didn't dive. I jumped off of it. I've dove off high things before and landed on my back or my stomach. It does not feel good. And so I ended up doing it, and my kids were happy with that. But afterwards, I talked about it with my daughter, and I said, Jay, do you know why? Do you know why I did this? Do you know why I jumped off that board? And she said, why? I said, because I was afraid. Because I was afraid. If I hadn't been afraid, it wouldn't have been a big deal to me. But because I was afraid, I knew I needed to do that. Why? Now, I said need. The reason I need to do that is because I need to constantly foster an ability to push through fear if it's not life-threatening. If it's not life-threatening, it's not threatening my family, if it's not threatening something that matters to me a great deal, okay? If it's not putting my entire financial portfolio at risk, something like that, then yeah, I'm going to push through it. And I was trying to teach her this lesson so that she and my son will get used to thinking this way, and they will push through fear. We went to one of the largest indoor water parks. It might be the largest indoor water park on the planet still, about a year ago. My wife fears heights, and she fears enclosed spaces. Well, guess what? A lot of these water slides, they're super high. Some of them are like 100 feet high, easily, or higher. And they're sometimes straight down, sometimes in an enclosed tube. There was one that went right around, in an enclosed tube, went right around and then went out to a little waterway. This was terrifying for my wife. But you know what? She pushed herself through this. There was one slide that she came down, and she was actually crying by the time she came out at the end. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm going to go do it again." And she went and did it again because she knows that when we push through these things that are not life-threatening, it actually grows us. And this is what happens. Instead of our brain making more connections of how scary this is, our brain actually makes connections of, oh, I'm okay. And if we do that enough times, again, why do I go on these roller coasters with my son or do drops of doom with my son or all these other things? It's to say, hey, I'm with you, we're safe, and we talk through them. And I could show you a video. Someone asked me about a video of taking my son on this roller coaster for the first time because you can see his fear, but also his delight at different times. And it shows the story of how fear works with us. But again, this is what I told her, because she asked me at this time, she said, "Daddy, how do you know when you shouldn't do it? You jumped off that diving board. How do you know when you shouldn't do it?" And this is what I said to her. I said, I take a step back and ask myself, what is the worst case scenario? Ask myself, what is the worst case scenario? For me, the worst case scenario in this platform was low. I can swim really well. Others around me are watching. I'm above water. So even if something goes a little bit wrong, I've also done it before. I've done it quite a few times before because I've always been scared of this. So often when I go to a high cliff and there's water around, I'll do it. But I often ask myself, what's the worst case scenario and can I handle it? Is it safe enough to do it right now? And if the answer is yes, then for me, that's the one I know I should do it. If the answer is no, actually, this is quite dangerous. Not according to just my brain in the moment, but according to my logic. So again, we got to make this connection. So we're constantly thinking still, rather than just shutting off and fearing. That's something that I use to kind of analyze this or feel my way around whether I should do something or not. Now, I've talked about visualization a couple of times. I'm going to talk about that now. I'm going to finish that story that I talked about the gentleman who was 40, 50 years old. How did he get over his fear? So I'll tell the entire story. So his parents come to me, he comes to me, says, I need help. We quickly determine this is because in junior high something happened to him in a public washroom. And what I started doing with him is I started introducing him to the fear, but in gentle, small steps. There are a few people in this world that can take huge leaps into fear. It seems that they can do anything. Now, I would argue that most of them have learned this over time. Having said that, there are some people who it seems like the bigger the fear, the harder they go towards it, and they just do it, okay? People that are there for the rush or for the adrenaline rush. For most people, I don't recommend. If you're afraid of heights, the first thing you do is probably not jump out of a plane. And this is why, because typically it's so overwhelming, it's so overpowering, the panic, that it shuts down our brain and we actually tie more fear to it, okay? So this is the advice from the psycho. The advice from the psychologist is go easy on yourself. So the first step with this gentleman who couldn't hold a full-time job was I told him, this is what I want you to do. So we built up some rapport. He felt safe with me. And I said, you're in the safe room right now. I want you to close your eyes. And I said, this is what I want you to visualize. I want you to visualize walking by. You're not going to go inside. Just walk by the public washroom. The door's open. Walk by. And you could see this. You could see the strength of a response in him already. So I was pushing him, right? But I wasn't saying, here, I'm going to throw you into a toilet right now and dunk your head. That's not what I was saying. That's not going to help him feel safe. Throwing a kid into the pool that's scared typically doesn't help the kid get over fear. It simply builds up a stronger fear. If you've had this happen to you or you know other people, you know how this works, okay? Regardless of the stories that we've heard about how wonderful it is, because it's not most of the time. Every once in a while it can work. Most of the time it's terrible, okay? So I pushed him a little bit. Just visualize, you're not even doing it, but just visualize walking by the washroom. And once he started to get comfortable with that, then we went a little bit further and said, I want you to walk up to the washroom. I want you to put up the door, your hand on the door handle. Don't go in. Just put your hand on the door handle. You're safe. You're not going to go in. Then go into the washroom, or just look in. Open the door and look in. And then go in. Visualizing, not real. Visualizing. We did this over a course of a few sessions. Now, here's the thing. We were about 4 or 5 sessions in with this guy. So I was trying to work quickly, okay? And I had to go. I was on this internship at the time, and the internship was ending. So I realized, wait a second, I'm not going to be with this client. And I tell you the truth, I was worried for him. I went, I don't know if he's making great progress, but I don't know if he's going to get past this. So what I did was I basically went, hey, listen, I'm going to help you as much as I can, but I'm not going to be around. You're going to have to figure out some of this stuff on your own. So here are the next steps that I want you to practice. And when we practiced some of them in session, and then I had to go, and I was done. I was done working there. And I didn't know how this would turn out for the guy. But here's the thing. So I said we're done with sessions. And this is over the course of like 5, 6 weeks. So for his entire life, for something like 25, 30 years, maybe 35 years, he had not been able to go to a public washroom to relieve himself. Over the course of 5 or 6 weeks, by practicing this and pushing him constantly, but keeping it safe, his brain had changed so much that he wrote me an email. This is just before I left that center. Just before I left, I got an email from him, like I think the last day or the last 2 days or something. He wrote me an email and said, Mark, I have something I want to tell you. There's a local hospital here. He said, I just went to the hospital just outside my home. And I went into the public washroom and I relieved myself. And I almost started crying because I thought, this is amazing how quickly this man has gone from completely being debilitated by fear to being in a place where he's able. I was so happy for him because now, and I don't know his story. I have not met him since then. It was the kind of relationship where after I leave, and this works in psychology a lot of the time, especially if you're working for a healthcare center or something like that, a hospital, you don't know how people turn out. You don't know how it's going to end up. But I have great hope that guy figured it out because he was building a skill that he can utilize in so many ways. Here's another thing that I got him to visualize. In one of those last sessions, what I had him visualizing was, I want you to actually go to the bathroom. Just visualize it, but I want you to go to the washroom. How does it feel? And he had already worked through all these fears, visualizing, getting up to this. And it was fascinating paying attention to his face. This is when I knew we had kind of a breakthrough. On his face, he had his eyes closed, and on his face, he said, I feel so good. I said, yeah, he's a person who's constantly has a bladder that feels uncomfortable. And so there was a ton of relief there. So there were 2 things that we did. One is we pushed the fear. The other thing that we did, so to push the boundaries further and further out, the second thing we did was we used a different emotion, the emotion of relief, of desire, of hope, to pull him out the other end of fear as well. So we used both, the feeling of relief to start making a different connection in his brain, but also pushing back and realizing that he could be safe in this. Okay, hopefully this makes sense. Okay, so you can gain a ton of skills to help yourself through visualization. A ton of skills, because your brain has it's this emotional part of your brain has difficulty telling the difference between reality and fantasy. I actually had a nightmare last night. I was telling my wife about it this morning. I had a nightmare last night. And when you have a nightmare, your body doesn't know the difference between reality and fantasy. It doesn't matter that it's not happening to you. You still have a strong reaction to it. I couldn't sleep for like 2.5 hours last night. And this does not happen to me very often, okay? Have you ever had it, again, you're thinking about a job or something happening the next day, and you start stressing about it, and all of a sudden you start to have this physical reaction. You're sweating and you're anxious, and you're not able to sleep because you're not able to relax, even though it's fantasy. It's not even reality. It's not even real. The cool thing about this is that you can use it to your benefit. So use visualization. I'm going to give you some examples. One really famous example, and this is in a super famous book. The book is called Psycho-Cybernetics. Excuse me. The book is called Psycho-Cybernetics. And what the book is about is how to train your mind to start focusing on the things you want rather than things you don't want. Okay? Fantastic book. Difficult to read for a lot of people. Written in the 60s, so it's older, but it's fantastic. And it's actually the basis of a lot of the personal development industry because of how impactful it was. It was written by a doctor, a plastic surgeon that became very interested in psychology and was good friends with a lot of famous psychologists like Alfred Adler. Anyway, basically what he does is he shares this story about, I think it was Yale or Harvard. There was some school that many decades ago. It was an Ivy League school, maybe Purdue, I don't know. But they basically took 3 groups of students in gym class, basically. Okay, and then they said, we're going to separate you into 3 groups and we're going to give you different activities. Now, they measured this group of students' free throws. So basketball shots from the free throw line. And they measured their average, how many baskets they were getting out of 10. Okay? And they divided them evenly. So there wasn't like a good group and a bad group or anything like that. It was kind of divided evenly. They were all fairly mediocre with basketball. And then in all 3 groups, they told the first group, this is what we want you to do. We want you every single day for 10 minutes a day. That's all. 10 minutes a day in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening. What we want you to do is we want you to practice free throws for 10 minutes. And if you make a mistake, it doesn't go in. We just want you to visualize or to practice changing your grip on the ball, changing whatever you need to do, and shoot that shot again. Okay, fire that shot again. See how much you improve. I don't remember. I think it was just a 2-week experiment. Okay, so they took the second group, and the second group they said, we don't want you to touch a basketball. We simply want you for 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. We want you to visualize taking a basketball and throwing it from the free throw line. Visualize shooting that ball through the hoop. And if it doesn't make it in, make this really vivid. Feel the emotions of it. Make it very vivid. Pay attention to what you see, what you hear, what you feel, the temperature, whatever it is. And if you don't make that basket, take the ball back, adjust your shot, and try again. Okay? So 10 minutes for Group A, 10 minutes for Group B. For Group C, they said, don't go near a basketball, don't think about a basketball. Okay? This is a control group. So Group A, B, C, 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, they measured their free throw percentage again. Guess what they found? Group A, did they improve? Of course they improved. They're shooting baskets for 20 minutes a day, right? This group ended up improving something by like 23%. It was like 23-24%. Group B, the group that visualized shooting baskets but didn't actually touch a basketball, guess how much they improved? It was almost the same. So if the first group was about 23-24%, the second group improved by 22-23%, just by visualizing. The third group had no improvement at all whatsoever. What does that tell us? Now, first of all, I don't even know if you believe that story, okay? Because it's crazy. It's crazy to think that visualizing can have the same or similar effect to actually doing something physically. And yet that's what I'm going to propose for you. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to actually visualize what you're afraid of. Now, what you want to do is you want to visualize what you're afraid of, and then you want to introduce a good feeling as you go through with the action. So if you're scared of, I don't know, I'm going to use some odd examples, but no, I'll use good examples, okay? Let's say you're scared of having a conversation with somebody that you're afraid of how they'll react. Well, visualize having that conversation, but start to visualize it going well. If you're afraid of having a sales call with somebody, start to visualize a sales call, but visualize it going well. Somebody being excited about it, or even if they don't want what you're offering them, that they say no in a respectful way, and you have no hard feelings afterwards. Start visualizing the situations that you want to have with the things that you're afraid of. As you do that, you will start to destroy the fear. The fear will have less and less a hold of you. The panic will have less and less a hold of you. You'll still feel it, but now you can push through it, okay? Visualize the result of doing what you want in the end. Secondly, take some action. So again, start extremely small. For most people, if you're the kind of person that can take huge action, you're not watching this video, okay? If you're watching this video, take some action. Start small and just measure your results. That's even better if you can measure your results. But take some small action, and you can even practice in your head beforehand. When I was learning Mandarin, when I was learning Chinese, when I was in China, what I would do is it was hard to talk to people in the moment. It kind of freaked me out because my Chinese wasn't all that good at the beginning. By the end, when I was fluent, I was fine. But in the beginning, I would start practicing Chinese in my head on the way to the store. I would practice what I would say, and depending on what the other person would say, I would practice responding in different ways. Even that is taking some action, okay? So it's taking action, again, to push through some fear. You will completely change your brain if you do this. Do something, there's another idea, do something uncomfortable every day. Do some small uncomfortable thing on a daily basis. If you do that consistently, you'll get over your fear, because your brain will associate safety instead of fear with that, or safety instead of danger with that, I should say, okay? Now, The focus must be action eventually. It cannot simply be thinking. Keep in mind, the person who was throwing the basketball ended up having the better result. So in the end, you're going to have to take action at some point in time, but you can gear up for this, okay? Next, become uncomfortable with fear itself. Get to know your fears. What are they about? So many people feel fear and they run away from it. You can feel fear and simply ask yourself, what is this about? I could go into this far deeper. I'm not going to right now. If you want help with this, contact me. But legitimately, sometimes it's simply becoming comfortable with fear itself and going, what is this about? So I feel my heart rate is increasing. My breathing is becoming shallow. I'm feeling kind of sore in my stomach or tight in my neck or shoulders. Well, what is that about? Simply become aware of it. The more you're aware of it, the less hold, the less strength it has in your life on so many levels. Now, I said push yourself. Yes, push yourself. And a lot of this has been, okay? So visualize working effectively through fear. Again, it can be as simple as having an imaginary conversation with somebody. You will begin to change your brain. So you can even start with visualization, but push yourself. Secondly, pull yourself. Start associating the things that you want in life with the thing that you're afraid of. So I'll use an example for myself. So I could visualize myself being on that jumping platform above the water. I could visualize myself enjoying the rush, to feel good about it, and coming up out of the water. I don't know, I'm making this ridiculous, but people cheering, people asking for my autograph, whatever it is, okay? Again, my emotional brain doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality most of the time. So what my brain will start making an association with is, oh, when I do this, it feels great. When I do this, it feels great. Pull yourself. Next, take some action right now. Do something right now. 5-minute action. This is what I want you to do. And I want you to take some time. When I shut this video down, when I'm done, I want you to take 5 minutes not even 5 minutes. Ask yourself, what am I going to get done before tomorrow at 11 a.m.? What is one thing I can do to push myself a little bit, whether it's the visualization or simply being uncomfortable with something? What is one thing I'm going to do that doesn't take any longer than 5 minutes that I'm going to complete before 11 a.m. tomorrow? If you do this, I promise you that if you do this, I very rarely promise people something or guarantee some things. I promise you that if you do this and you do it again and again and again, you make a habit of it, what you're going to start doing is actually start appreciating fear. I'm going to go back to the guy who talked to me. You know what I'm going to hear? I'll shut down this video here for a sec. I'm going to talk about the guy again the guy who asked me when I was working in mental health care field, who asked me, Mark, it seems like you don't have any fear. What's going on? I've actually made a connection in my brain now that fear is wonderful. Now, this is going to sound really weird. I've worked at fear enough. I've visualized it enough. I've pushed through it enough. I've pulled myself through it enough. I've done enough of these things that I've actually come to a place where fear excites me. And if you really think about this, fear and excitement are actually very close in emotions. There's a very, very fine line between fear and excitement. I read a book once called The Big Leap that talks about how the difference between fear and excitement is fear is excitement with the breath taken out of it. It's not breathing when you feel the excitement, and then it's fear. And that's a really unique quote. But what I'm going to challenge you to do is start to utilize fear. Start to think about fear. Once you start becoming better with a tool, you lose your fear of it, right? So some people are scared of, a drill or a brad nailer, like a nailing gun. If you don't use it very often, of course it's going to be scary. Of course, if you don't know how to swim and you've never swam in your life and you just read stories about how people die at sea, you're going to be scared of the ocean. But if you read stories about people surviving, if you read stories about people loving the water and swimming with dolphins or whatever, if you go into the water and you acclimate yourself to this, if you start getting used to it, now water becomes something that you won't be afraid of. It's something that you can enjoy. And the same thing can happen with fear. Now, I've tried to give you a bunch of tips here, but this is short. I've probably only been on here for about an hour or so. This is not very long. There are clients that I've worked with where it takes 2 or 3 or 4 weeks in a row to work on something before they start seeing noticeable results, and that's okay. Here's what I'm going to recommend to you. If you are able to take action on all the things that I've talked about here, do that. because you don't need to do anything else. Get into the habit of doing this, and you will start to associate excitement with fear rather than terror with fear, panic with fear. And that's excellent for you. If you are somebody that still struggles with this, if you're somebody who goes, I don't know if I can do this on my own, then this is what I'm going to ask you to do. Reach out to somebody who can help you with it. This could be as easy as reaching out to a friend. This could be reaching out to a coach. This could be reaching out to a psychologist or a therapist or something like that. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is reach out to somebody, because that's what changes us. If we're not able to do it on our own, we surround ourselves with the right people and they help us. They encourage us. We're social creatures. So what is it that you're afraid of right now? What is it that you're afraid of? I'm going to tell you, the two people that could probably help you the most with this is either somebody in the same boat that's also working through it, and you can become accountable to each other and work through your fears at the same time. That can be fantastic for people. The other best person to work through it is somebody who is a professional in the field, who's excellent at helping people with this stuff and can speed up the process for you. Those are the two best people outside of yourself. The best person, if I'm going to be completely honest, is yourself. Work on this yourself. You have the ability to do this. Everyone has the ability to do this. I've never yet met somebody that I've worked with that can't get through fear, that can't push through it. So I encourage you to try it, mess around with this, put some comments down. Feel free to put some comments down. I'll interact with you a little bit and help you out with things as much as I can, because I love this stuff. Enjoy your day. Make this a fantastic week. Learn, grow, push through fear, pull yourself through fear, and become a better human being, the person that you know you can become. Enjoy.